Right, Shalom, Israel, Ka Halal, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Rika, Padash, Shalom, Wahab, Labayaf, Shal, Dawada. Double honors to the elders that are teaching the right doctrine in Israel, and salutations to the brothers that are pushing the word in truth and sincerity. So, this video is going to be Colossians chapter 2, verse 16, breakdown part 2. All right, because a while ago, we had to correct some brothers in regards to the moon cycle they was keeping, okay? Because the Passover is coming up soon, and brothers have to know how the moon works in order to keep the feast day on the correct day, because it's very significant, because Passover means to miss judgment. And we all know that we're in a time of judgment where the Heavenly Father is sending chaos throughout the four corners of the world, whether it be the coronavirus or the fires in Australia, the floods in America now, as I've just been told. And also the fact that the Lord revealed the chariot to one of the sisters in the camp also shows that the time is at hand. And people are still caught in two minds as to whether Colossians 2 and 16 is actually saying that you shouldn't correct people in regards to when the new moon comes in. But that's actually false, because if you analyze that precept, okay, because the scripture says what? Whom shall he teach knowledge? Let me get that real quick, actually, before I even go into that one. Because in order to understand Colossians chapter 2, verses 16, okay, get this one. Isaiah chapter 28, verses 9, it says, whom shall he teach knowledge, and whom shall he make to understand doctrine? And the doctrine is the Colossians 2:16 doctrine that they're pushing, saying that means that you can't correct brothers concerning when the moon cycles are. That's the precept they use to try to bail themselves out, okay? Without regarding the fact that they had a breakdown already available for the Akim, teaching people how the moon actually works. But because it was an incorrect breakdown, they've resorted to Colossians 2:16 as a get out of jail precept. And in actuality, that Colossians 2 and 16, you can't precept it if you break it down that way. So this video is a part 2 just to look at it from a different perspective, okay? So this is Isaiah 28 verses 9. It says, who is the Lord going to teach knowledge and make to understand the doctrine, the correct doctrine? It says, them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. Now, here's the point I want. It says, for precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line. So you need to have the precepts, and they all have to link up, not just 1 or 2, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. Because this topic of the new moon and the Sabbaths not being taught to the children of Israel is a trespass to teach them the correct way. That's not what Paul was saying. And Paul will be going against his own principles. If you're breaking it down that way, you're making Paul a liar. And this is why Peter said that Paul's letters are hard to be understood. And that precept in Colossians 2:16 has tripped a lot of brothers up. That's why I'm making this video, because brothers are still debating in their mind whether this is a correct breakdown or not. So after I finish the video, you go and read the precept for yourself, and you will realize beyond any reasonable doubt that this is the correct way to break it down. And also, a lot of times people want to say that we're babes in the truth and we just came in 2 seconds ago, which is okay, because the Lord said, who is he going to make to understand this gospel? It says, them that are weaned from the milk. And who's weaned from the milk? Children, okay? So if the Lord is revealing the word unto babes, then that's in accordance with the prophecies of the Bible, because he said, I am going to make the babes understand this doctrine. Right, so let me get what Peter said real quick. Right, so this is what Peter said. This is 2 Peter 3 and 16 real quick. It says, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable rest, as they do also the other scriptures unto their own destruction. You see, Paul said it best. Peter said it best about Paul, because he himself had read the epistles and he couldn't understand some of the things that Paul was saying. So Paul had to expound more perfectly to him. And I'm going to show you precepts where Paul actually preached to the disciples, because even the disciples were having difficulties with understanding some of the things that Paul said, because Paul was coming from a learned perspective. And the disciples, most of them for the bulk, were just regular men who in the spirit were men that were being reincarnated to just meet Yahushua and to vibe with him to fulfill prophecy. Like, for instance, if you examine the character Peter, he was actually King David reincarnated. That's why Yahushua said, upon this rock will I build my church, which church means army, by the way. Okay, not a chapel where you go and sing and dance and shaka. This is what they painted as a picture for you in today's day and age. But if you go back in time, church is actually a military. Okay, so the Lord is revealing this knowledge onto the babes. And a lot of people are not happy with that. But for those of you that are sincere and want to learn, let's go to the precept at hand. So this is Colossians 2 and 16. I'm going to read the 16th verse and then I'll go to a latter verse just to further expound, okay, on it. So this is Colossians 2 and 16. It says, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of an holy day, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come. Now the point of this whole precept is in the last few words here. But the body is of Yahushua. Why did Paul say, but the body is of Yahushua? Why? Because the reason why he even said, let no man judge you in meat or in drink, was because he was talking in respect to the burnt offerings in meat and in drink, which we had to give on those respective days. Because a lot of Israelites keep forgetting that Yahushua was what? The sacrifice that the Lord gave to the nation of Israel. To what? To cancel out those meat and drink offerings, which we had to give to the priest. This is what Paul was talking about. He never said you can't correct people concerning the new moons or when the Sabbath comes in. That's why he said, but the body is of Hamashiach, Yahushua. So if you're going around using this as a precept to say that we can't correct brothers concerning when the Sabbaths are, concerning when the new moons are, well, that makes you a hypocrite, because you've got various breakdowns out there teaching brothers when the high holy days come in, teaching brothers how the moon works. Because if that wasn't the case, there wouldn't have been a video done anyway, because there would be nothing to counter. So the fact that you've already made videos trying to teach when the new moon comes in, when the Sabbath days are, when the high holy days are, this cuts you yourself. But the reason why you pulled this precept out is because your breakdown has been corrected. And because correction is grievous to a fool and him that forsaketh the way, that's why brothers pull out this precept. And this precept doesn't even mean that, what you're trying to teach the children of Israel. Is actually talking about the meat offerings, that's the burnt offerings on those specific days. And Ezekiel expounded on that perfectly. So I'm going to go to the book of Ezekiel first, and then after, I'm going to go to another of Paul's letters. Because Ezekiel makes it as clear as day. Okay, there you go. This is Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 17. Look at what Ezekiel says. It says, and it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings. Did you see that? Judge no man in meat offerings or in drink offerings. But here Ezekiel is being instructed and is being said what? And it shall be the prince's part to give burnt offerings and meat offerings and drink offerings in the feasts and in the new moons and in the Sabbaths. And in all solemnities of the house of Israel, he shall prepare the sin offering and the meat offering. Now, the main point you need to pick from this whole thing is the sin. The reason why Yahushua came for the nation of Israel was to save them. Actually, let me not be like these Christian pastors. Let me just read it for you. let's go back to basics now. Since we're babes, we're unlearned. Let's go back to the milk. Okay, this is Matthew chapter 1 verses, I believe it's 21. So Matthew 1 and 21, it says, and she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yahushai. Matthew 1 and 21. And she shall bring forth a son, and thou shalt call his name Yahushai, for he shall save his people from their sins. So notice it says he shall save his people from their sins. Okay, and here it's saying the meat offering, the drink offering for the Sabbaths, the new moons, the solemnities, the high holy days are all for what? Sin offerings and meat offerings. This is what Apostle Paul was talking about in Colossians. It had nothing to do with correcting the Israelites concerning when the feast days are, when the Sabbath days are, or when the high holy days are. Okay, or when the new moons are, Salakia. You can correct the Israelites concerning how the moon cycles work, because without that, they wouldn't even be able to celebrate Yahushai. Because Yahushai is the new Passover, by the way. And if they don't know when the Passover comes in, how would they be able to celebrate Yahushai to commemorate his death? So the fact that you're teaching the Israelites this wrong breakdown as a get out of jail card because your breakdown has been exposed to be a shambles, the Most High Yahushai is looking at it. And that's why he's putting the spirit on me to come out and clarify it. Now, whether you want to accept it or not, that's entirely up to you. At the end of the day, once the truth is out, is out. And the truth is always going to stand firm. Now, let's go to the book of Corinth. But before I proceed, Colossians chapter 2 verses 16 has nothing to do with correcting people concerning high holy days or new moons. Now, let's move on. Because notice here, it says, but the body is of Yahushua HaMashiach. Okay. Okay, so let's go to Corinth now. It's going to get very interesting. Okay. So this is 1 Corinthians 5, and I'm going to start from verse 7. Now listen to what Paul is saying about Yahushai. Bear in mind, Apostle Paul said, but the body is of Yahushai. So he was saying we don't have to give the meat offerings. We don't have to give the drink offerings on those respective days. Why? Because Yahushai's body is now the sacrifice. That's why he said the body is of Yahushai. This is to further expound on that. You got to be careful with these Apostle Paul letters. Peter warned you the first time, and I'm warning you a second time. This is 1 Corinthians 5 and verses 7. It says, purge out therefore the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as ye are unleavened. For even Hamashiach, Yahushai, our Passover. Look at that. So Yahushai is now the Passover. That's why when he was taking the bread and the drink, he said, eat this, this is my body. Drink this, this is my blood. It was symbolic to show you he is the new sacrifice. You don't need no sheep or no goats, because the Heavenly Father said what? The blood of lambs and all of that is not pleasing to him anymore. That's why he gave us Yahushai. Okay, it says, for even Hamashiach Yahushai, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast. Look at this. Therefore, let us keep the feast. Now, when you go back to Colossians, let me get that real quick. When you go to Colossians chapter 2, verse 16, Paul just said here, let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink or in respect of a holy day. So why is Paul now saying keep the feast of unleavened bread? Shouldn't he not care about it? Because he said don't judge anyone, just leave them. If they want to keep it, let them keep it. If they don't want to keep it, don't let them keep it. Wouldn't that be a direct contradiction to what Apostle Paul is telling the Israelites to keep the feast of unleavened bread? with respect to the fact that Yahweh Shai is the new sacrifice. So we don't have to do those goat and sheep sacrifices anymore. That's all he was saying. But brothers always try and make the apostles of Yahweh Hashem Shai liars just so they can teach new doctrines, man. Okay? And you have a gang of brothers that hail behind them. So just because you have a gang of brothers hailing behind you, it doesn't make your doctrine right. Because at the end of the day, hey, the word is here, man. And you can see it in black and white. Anyway, let's carry on reading. So it says, for even Amashek Yahweh Shai is our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Therefore, let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. And it's funny, a lot of times brothers say they're teaching the word in truth and sincerity. But when the truth is actually coming out, they despise it. So which is which? Because you can clearly see that Paul is not talking about not correcting brothers concerning new moons or feast days. So are you going to come out and make a video as well apologizing for giving the wrong breakdown? Are you going to stop being proud and saying you have 100% truth when you're clearly being shown to be erring in your understanding of the gospel? And the fact that Colossians 2:16 says, do not judge any man. Okay, he says here, let no man therefore judge you. And he now comes here to say, you see, that's the spirit. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verses 1, it says, dare any of you having a matter against another go to the law before the unjust and not before the saints? What is Paul saying here? Paul is saying, why the hell would you go to Esau's law when you can go to one of the Israelite men who have the laws of Yahweh Hashem Yahshua for judgment? Because that's what a lot of you do in regards to going to Esau for everything. When you want to know when the new moon is, you go to Esau. When you want to know when your high holy days are, you go to Esau. When you want to know when the Sabbath is, you go to Esau. Because when Esau's app says the new moon is on such and such date, that's exactly what you're using. And Paul is saying, how dare you do that? Anyway, let me carry on reading. Dare any of you having a matter against another go to law before the unjust and not before the saints? Question mark. So he's saying, how the hell can you be going to a new moon app when an Israelite man is showing you in the Bible that the new moon is a crescent, showing you in the Bible that the high holy days are on such and such date because the crescent comes in on such day, and he's showing you practical evidence. But yet Esau's new moon app has to be the truth against Yahweh Hashem Yahushai. Now verses 2 is the point, and that's another contradiction to Colossians 2:16 if it is broken down the way they're telling us. Do ye not know that the saints shall judge the world? Question mark. And if the world shall be judged by you, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? And this applies perfectly to correcting brothers concerning the new moon, because the new moon is a small matter. It's not hard to be understood. The Lord created two great lights at the beginning. This is like kindergarten stuff. That's why and so that precept applies to this situation. Paul said, are ye unworthy to judge the smallest matters? This is a small issue, man. This shouldn't have even been an argument, considering the fact that men that you actually look up to and hold in such high acclaim have validated the doctrine which is being brought forth, which is not a new doctrine. But the rebelliousness of your heart is making you not want to accept the reality of the facts. Now let's deal with some more precepts concerning Apostle Paul and the feast days, because a lot of times people keep forgetting that if you break down Apostle Paul's letters the wrong way, it can make him look like he contradicted himself. Okay? So let's go to the book of Acts real quick. Right, so this is Acts chapter 20 and verses 23. Okay? This is concerning the law of the Nazarite. Because don't forget, Paul said what? Don't judge any man concerning the high holy days and blah, blah, blah. So meaning that we don't have to keep the high holy days no more. And even if we do keep the high holy days, no one is allowed to judge us concerning them. No one is allowed to judge us concerning the feast days. So that means that everyone can just blah, blah, blah and do whatever they want concerning the law and not be checked. But that's not what he was saying. And this is going to further prove that even Paul himself kept the law, kept the feast days, kept the high holy days. But what he was the point he was trying to make was, don't go around pointing fingers at people concerning the old covenant of sacrifice as pertaining to how many lambs and goats and sheep one must sacrifice on those high holy days. Why? Because Yahushua gave himself as the ultimate sacrifice. Acts chapter 21 verse 23 says, do therefore this that we say to thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Now this vow is talking about the vow of the Nazarite. You can go and read that in the book of Numbers for those of you that are interested in the vow of the Nazarite. It says, them take and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly. Okay, because a lot of you are disorderly. That's why you don't want to accept correction. So here the elders are telling Apostle Paul to go and purify himself concerning the law of the Nazarite, that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. Now let's see if Paul adhered to it or he rebuked them and said, you're not allowed to judge me anymore, okay, because that's the old covenant. Let's find out if he followed through with it. This is verses 26. Then Paul took the men, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them. Okay, so Apostle Paul kept the law. So why would he now come and tell brothers not to keep the high holy days anymore, not to correct brothers concerning the moons? Because the moons is what helps us to call in the feast days. So without the moon, we won't know what time it is. The moon is like the Most High's clock. So in order to know when the feast day is coming, we need the moon. It's very, very important. That's why the Lord had a big chariot on top of the moon, just to show you how significant the moon is. Anyway, let's look at some other scriptures as well. Right, so this is Acts chapter 20 and verses 6. This is Apostle Paul, yeah. He said, and we sailed from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread. You see, so Paul observed the Passover. And we sailed away from Philippi after the days of unleavened bread, and came unto them to Troas in 5 days, where we abode 7 days. And this is going to show you Apostle Paul used to preach to the disciples because he was more learned than they were. Verse 7, and upon the first day of the week, when the disciples came together, every single one of them, by the way, to break bread, Apostle Paul preached unto them, ready to depart on the morrow, and continued his speech until midnight. So Apostle Paul preached to the disciples, and I'm sure Peter was there, okay? And Peter didn't say, I'm the head of the church. You can't talk to me like that. Now, let's get some more precepts just to close this out. So we'll get Acts 15 and 29 real quick, just to show you that your breakdown is a direct contradiction to what this thing is all about. So Acts 15 and... Actually, let me start from verse 6. Right here. So this is Acts chapter 15 verses 6. It says, and the apostles and elders came together. Notice it says apostles, all of them, all the apostles, including Peter, the head of the church. It says, and the apostles and elders came together for to consider of this matter. And when there had been much disputing, Peter rose up. So notice Peter was there, you know, the head of the church, and said unto them, men and brethren, ye know that a good while ago Yahweh made a choice amongst us, that the Gentiles by my mouth should hear the word of the gospel and believe. That's when he went to Cornelius. Okay. Verse 12. Then all the multitude kept silence and gave audience. So notice Peter was there. That's why I read that verse. So this is verses 12 continuing. And gave audience to Barnabas and Paul. So notice Barnabas and Paul were there as well, declaring what miracles and wonders Yahweh had wrought among the Gentiles by them. And after they had held their peace, James answered, saying, Men and brethren, hearken unto me. This is verses 20. But that we write unto them that they abstain from pollutions of idols and from fornication and from things strangled, and from blood. Now, a lot of people are going to argue and say this is not talking about animals. So let's go to the NLT version. This is Acts chapter 15 verses 20. Instead, we should write and tell them to abstain from eating food offered to idols, from sexual immorality, from eating the meat of strangled animals, and from consuming blood. Strangled animals. Now, this is a direct contradiction to Colossians. Why? I'll show you. Direct contradiction to Colossians. Because if you read Colossians 2 and 16 again, look what it says. Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink. That's a contradiction to that. Because he just said here, okay, in Acts 15 and verses 20, that what? People should abstain from eating foods or meat of strangled animals. And here it says what? Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink. So that's a contradiction. Because he was just telling people, do not eat food or meat which is strangled. Do not eat meat from animals that are strangled. And here Paul is saying what? Let no man judge you in meat or in drink. So that clearly shows you he was not saying you can't correct people concerning the high holy days or the new moons when they come in, or what to eat on them. He wasn't talking about that, but rather he was saying, don't point fingers at people that don't give the burnt offerings and the meat offerings for those specific days, because Yahweh Shai is the ultimate sacrifice who has already come and died to even the score. And another reason why he was saying that as well is because you have a lot of people in Israel, they're hypocrites. They point fingers at other people, but they themselves don't even keep the law. And I'm going to go into that as well before I close out. That will actually be my finalizing precept. Okay. So this is Galatians chapter 6 and verses 13, I believe. Oh, there you go. Right. It says, for neither they themselves who are circumcised keep the law. He's talking about the scribe and the Pharisees, because they were circumcised, but they were hypocrites. They were finger pointers. Where is your 6 cows? Where is your 5 lambs? You need to have a burnt offering. You need to have a meat offering for because the new moon is here. But even they themselves weren't even keeping the law. Okay? It says, for neither they themselves who are circumcised keep the law, but desire to have you circumcised, that they may glory in your flesh. But Yahweh forbid that I should glory, save in the cross of Hamashiach Yahushai, by whom the world is crucified unto me, and I unto the world. For in Hamashiach Yahushai neither circumcision availeth anything, nor uncircumcision, but a new creature. Why did he say that? Because why? The body of Yahushai is the 6 lambs and the 7 rams and the goats and the turtle doves and all of that other stuff that we used to give to the priest. So the high priest or the scribes and the Pharisees who were putting burdens on people to still giving those sacrifices, that was all null and void, because the Heavenly Father has no pleasure in that anymore. That's all Paul was trying to say. Okay? That's all Paul was trying to say. Now, in terms of the circumcision, that just means the Jews in Jerusalem, or mainly the scribes and the Pharisees, because they were the ones that were known as the people of the circumcision. The uncircumcision will be the Gentiles. So the circumcision used to boast against the uncircumcision. That's why Paul worded things this way. It has nothing to do with not being physically circumcised in the flesh, because Paul himself was circumcised. Okay? Paul himself was circumcised. So he wouldn't tell a man not to get circumcised if he himself was circumcised, because then that would be a direct contradiction to the ministry which he was trying to push at the time. But anyway, that's all I got to say for this session. So I just want to give all praises to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bashem Rakapadash, Shalom, I hope the church was edified. Shalom.